podcast. We're talking about the future of Georgia politics today. And before I go there, I just want to welcome back our co-host, Sergeant Jay Robinson, Marine Combat Sergeant retired.
Not
Hello,
retired.
Ernest.
Hello, how you doing? I'm not
Huh?
retired. I'm not retired. You always add something else in
You're
there.
not retired.
No, I'm not.
Okay, okay.
But
All
thank you.
right. But anyway, yes, sir. And we have on the show today a young lady, that's running for Georgia Superintendent of Schools. This is her first time on the show, and I want to welcome her and Dr. Nelva Lee, a Georgia educator and businesswoman who is running for Georgia State School Superintendent. Her campaign focuses on equity of an opportunity, school safety, and making sure every student graduates prepared for college and equipped with real-world trade or industry skills in a system that is transparent, accountable, and responsive to families. Dr. Lee, thank you for joining the World Weekly. How are
Thank
you?
you for having me.
Okay, let's start with the big picture. All right, now you're running for superintendent of public schools in Georgia, and what does that really entail?
Really, most of these positions are all about leadership, uh, Walt. The current superintendent, he has been in that office 11 going on 12 years. And in that time frame, Georgia has decreased in the rankings nationwide. We are currently 38th out of 50, which is horrible. 70% of our fourth graders are not proficient in reading, and that has gone down under Wood's tenure. 76% of our eighth graders are not proficient in math. That has also decreased under his tenure. So it's really all about leadership, putting forth a vision for all the school districts to follow.
And that's K through 12, right?
That is correct.
Oh, okay. Ernest, you have any questions before we move on, real
Well, I
quick?
mean, one, thank you so much for being with us today. I and so because I'm new, haven't been introduced to you and our audience, and you. So, who is Dr. Nelva Lee, and why is it that you are running for school superintendent?
All right. Well, let me give you a little brief bio. I have been in healthcare and education for most of my working career. All right. So I have 30 years of experience in healthcare. I have my bachelor's, doctorate, and my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate are all in healthcare administration. Because of my healthcare administration work, I started a vocational school. I recognized that there was a gap in the industry. And so I started a vocational school where we train bilingual individuals to become medical interpreters. And I became very involved in that space, so much so that I was a subject matter expert and the first chair of the National Board of Certification for medical interpreters. As far as education is concerned, as I said, I was the CEO and founder of that vocational school, but I also homeschool my children, Ernest. I also was very involved in their educational journey. My eldest, who I homeschooled, was on the spectrum, and I realized that he needed much more of a hands-on approach for his learning. And I also was a substitute teacher. And a professor. I was an adjunct professor of healthcare administration for over 12 years. And so that is what I bring to the table, just a very diverse and nice panoramic view of what is needed for the school system. I'm also an author, just to throw that in there. I'm an author. On a personal note, I've been married to my husband 25 years. We just celebrated our 25th
Oh,
anniversary
congratulations.
in Greece, which was really nice. And I have three beautiful children. My youngest is adopted. We adopted her from the foster care system. So that's a little bit about me, Ernest.
That's awesome.
Okay. You have taught graduate and undergraduate courses for
That
more
is
than 10
correct.
years.
Hmm.
And you teach healthcare administration
So I
and
taught, yeah,
interpreter education.
correct, yes. Hmm.
Okay, so how do you find that? I mean, I see that back in 2003 or 2004, you
Correct.
started Mateo.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That is
And,
correct.
and, and talk let's talk a little bit about Mateo. Even I think the voters would like to know as much as possible about you. So let's talk about that.
Sure. So I was a director of patient advocacy at the Grady Health System, and Grady is one of the largest public hospitals here in the Southeast.
Mhm.
And one of the programs in my department was interpreting services. And we had a really difficult time, Walt, just training our interpreters and getting them qualified. So just because you're bilingual does not mean that you're qualified to be an interpreter. You have to be taught. And it was very difficult back in the early 2000s to do that. And so I decided that's a gap in the industry. I'm going to start my own school. And that's what I did. I started my own vocational program. I had already been taught how to build curriculums because I was an adjunct professor. And so I built those curriculums based on that. And like I said, I became a leader in the industry.
My
So because of that, because of my school that was able to fit that need, to meet that very critical need of training
Mhm.
for these individuals, I became a leader in the industry. And then when we went towards certification, getting everyone certified, I was asked to be a subject matter expert. And I did that work for a couple of years while we were building the certification process. And as a result of that, when we had an actual functional certification process, I was asked to be the first chair of that board. And so I'm very proud of the work that I did. I'm very proud of how I advanced this industry. And that just tells you a little bit about my leadership. If I see something that's needed, I get in there, I work hard, and I'm able to see results. And so an entire industry, the medical interpreting industry here in the state, in the country, I was able to be a pivotal instrument of leadership and vision for that. Okay.
So you're still associated with Metro? How do you even, or you just it's just
I,
a
I
acronym,
am
huh?
not. I am not. I'm a serial entrepreneur. And so now my focus is on my new company. So I'm also very passionate. I'm passionate about a lot of things. Okay. So I'm very passionate also about the plight of those that are in apartments, and their rents keep going up and up and up, right? And so it's leading to a lot of homelessness. And so my new company is trying to address that. So I have a crypto coin that's backed by real estate, and the goal is to have renters use that crypto coin towards their rent, and it'll be a rent to own type of installments, and that very similar to Divvy, but on the commercial side. And we're hoping to be able to hold, rents to a um, very manageable within like a third of someone's income, so that they're not found homeless. So rent is that's a very near and dear part of my passion. I'll tell you a little story, Walt. When I was a very little girl, my mother and I had rental issues, and we lived in abandoned homes in the state of New York, up there where you're at,
Ah,
in abandoned apartments. And so I don't want anyone to have to go through what we went through. And so that's what I'm hoping to solve with concrete build financing. That's my new venture. And so if anyone is interested in
okay.
looking that up, they can go to my website, concretebuild.org.
And that'll be in the show notes, folks, just for your
Wonderful.
info. You know, we keep a lot of show notes. They too long at sometimes they're too long. But anyway, yeah, well, how does that now this is a separate track, okay,
Correct. Hmm.
that you're on in terms of, providing low cost
Housing.
housing for people.
Correct. Proper.
Okay. Now the other track is how do you go about doing that? I mean, how are you going to fund that? I mean, we're in a government now that's pulling back a lot of those, things, social programs and things of that nature. You know, you, I don't know how you're going to do that under the
So
current.
this is not your typical affordable housing program. Like I said, this is concrete built financing is a crypto coin backed by real estate, and the way that we're going about providing rent is through rent to own programs. rent-to-own platform, and it's very similar to Divvy. I don't know if you're familiar with Divvy. Divvy
Oh, yeah,
basically
absolutely.
Okay, Divvy basically does rent to own for homes. We would do rent
Mhm.
to own for condos, and that will keep the cost low because obviously, if you're renting to own, you're paying on the cost of the full condo and not just rent. So it provides ownership, and then what we will also do is match some of that their down payment where they can own concrete build coins as well. So it would provide them with equity. It provides them with the future ownership of that condo, and it keeps their monthly payments low because of that. So that's really what we're looking at, and it's not a government funded program at all.
Oh, okay, okay.
Mhm.
I think we may want to explore that on a different show
Yes,
because
definitely. Just bring me on.
you
I'll
inserted
tell you all about it.
you inserted crypto. So when I hear crypto, I know all the red flags and the alarm goes up. Da, da, da.
That is
So,
unfortunate. That is unfortunate. But fiat currency is what should give you alarms because fiat currency is on the way out.
all right. Now let's start with the big picture here. All
Hmm.
right, you're running for Georgia school superintendent.
That is correct.
Okay, and you will be overseeing K through 12.
Correct.
All right. What is your vision for the states for that position and what you
Hmm.
plan to do?
Sure, sure.
What do
So
you
for
plan to do as a state superintendent that makes you different than the incumbent? I think he resigned. What's his name? Woods?
yes, correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
Woods, right? Yeah.
For starters, I would provide vision and leadership, and everyone that tells you that has met him and that is even under him. I've spoken to many of his superintendents, and that's not what he does. He's very kind of absent from the leadership post. I'm not sure if he is just a figurehead, but I'm not really. I know for a fact that he does not provide that leadership and that vision that's needed on a global scale. Um,
Okay.
One of the things that I like to see is for us to really prioritize literacy again. All right. I don't know how you learn to learn how to read, Walt, but back in the day, it wasn't that complicated, right? We learned with phonics and we learned, step by step. Our parents helped us, our teachers helped us. And by the time we were second or third grade, we were reading.
Mhm.
Nowadays, like I just mentioned, 70% of our fourth graders are not proficient in reading, and we're graduating students. They're going off to college and having to take remedial courses because of it. So we're not focused on literacy. We're not focused on the basics anymore, and
Mhm.
it's causing our children to be left behind. Here's a statistic for you. By third grade, prisons are built based on the amount of children that are not reading. That should be a red flag to everyone, that a prison can be built based on the lack of literacy. So we know that prison knows that if someone is not reading, they're not going to be successful in life, and they're going to end up being on the wrong side of the law. And so that is what this is how morally important educating our children is.
How do you square? So there's approximately 1.87 million students in K through 12 in Georgia.
Okay.
Roughly 46,000 of them are homeless.
Mm.
And you had made mention about, you know, being able to kind of address some of those issues. But as we know that scarcity is whether it's funding, uh, uh, food insecurities, home
Mm-hmm.
insecurities, contribute to some of those negative outcomes as it pertains to the ability for those students to being able to learn. So,
Yes.
what hasn't been addressed to being able to make the corrections to reduce the number of homeless students in the state, and then also being able to increase the number of graduates within the
Mhm.
state?
Those are excellent questions, Ernest. I'm so glad that you made that connection. For starters, as I mentioned, my other business, my new venture, is
Yeah.
trying to address the issue of homelessness. We have so many companies, big investment companies that have come into Georgia and have bought out our apartment buildings. And guess what they do? The minute they buy them, they raise and raise and raise the rents.
Yeah.
They're pricing out people. I mean, the cost of rent is no longer affordable for so many. And that is what's leading to the homelessness. And so we need to address this. It's a moral issue. If nothing else, we should not want to see families, people who are working, oftentimes 2 3 jobs and can't afford rent. That's immoral in my book. So we need to have different. Yes, there are government programs, as you mentioned, Walt, but the private sector broke it, and the private sector can fix it as well.
Oh, the private
Uh,
sector broke it in the. Oh, okay, okay.
yes, and I
But I would like
believe.
to ask you, what do you think
Mhm.
about?
But
I
let
don't
me
mean to cut you off.
can I finish
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
second question that
Yeah,
Ernest
please,
asked?
please.
So on the homelessness, we definitely need to address that for sure. On the issue of increasing graduation rates, that is why one of my signature initiative is that I like to see graduates graduate not just with a high school diploma but with a trade school certificate, and this is universal. And the reason for that is if we can improve, let's let's just say this. When students know that when they finish high school, they're going to be able to provide for themselves, pay their bills, feed themselves, they're more apt to stay in school until they're completed. All right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about these inflated numbers of graduates as we're just pushing people along. No, I'm talking about students graduating workforce ready. Now, for those that are college bound, a trade school certificate helps them as well. It helps them gain experience in the industry that they're wanting to get a degree in. Okay, that's valuable. I got a trade school certificate when I was the summer between my junior and senior year in high school, and it was a game changer because I was getting it. I got it in healthcare, and it allowed me to get experience. And so when I got my bachelor's, I was instantly able to get a really good paying job because of it. And so for those, however, that are not college bound, it is a career. It gives them a career. And I'd like to do something similar to how you guys do it up in Buffalo, which is eighth graders are exposed to the various trade school programs that are available so that by the time they're in ninth or 10th grade, they're already know which trade schools they're going to be training under. And so
That's
those
a good
trade schools,
program.
and that doesn't add not one penny to the budget, by the way, because here in Georgia, we're already allocating funds to dual enrollment. So students are able to already get college credits, right? And so instead of them just getting all these college credits, they'll be able to get it in a trade school that they can get within 6 months, 18 to 24 months. And now they have a way to actually enter a career and enter the workforce fully ready to be independent.
All right, I would like to ask you about the Department of Education, the
Yes.
DOE,
Mhm.
under Linda McMahon. How do you feel about them closing it down, decommissioning the DOE? You know, there was no benefit to the DOE?
So let me give you a little bit of history lesson, and then I'll answer that question.
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
when the DOE started in the 1980s, right? It's not been a long
Hmm.
of around that long, but it started back in the 1980s. And do you know that 60% of the DOE's budget does not go to K-12? Okay, it goes to colleges in the form of Pell Grants. And back when it first started, 70% of your college tuition could be covered by Pell Grant. 70%.
Hmm. That be what you.
Nowadays, Pell Grant just barely scratches the surface. Every student now knows they're going to end up getting a loan when they get out of college. They're going to have a mortgage along with their college diploma or their college degree. That
Hmm.
is that is a disservice. Okay, college tuition has outpaced inflation. Okay. Back in again 1980s, college tuition was about $10,000, and that included everything, room and board. Right? You can't find
Okay.
that anywhere now. So that's a little bit about the DOE. 60% of the DOE's budget goes to colleges. The rest that goes, 25% that goes to the states, right, comes with all kinds of red tape and regulations attached. So the states have to match a lot of those funds just to be able to use it. I say just give the states a block grant and without all those regulations tied to it. I'll give you one example. Special education, right?
Hmm.
15% of the budget, the DOE's budget that goes to the states, it's in special education. That comes with so much red tape to the point that if a school wants to put a child wants access to those funds, they have to put children on special ed. And they don't count towards your testing scores, your exam, global exam scores
Hmm.
for that
Hmm.
school. And B, now you have a student that you're just pushing to the side. You're telling that student you have issues. We don't really need to put a lot of time and effort into getting you to learn properly. I'm telling you, it's a disservice all around. I'm very much for block grants to go directly to the school systems, to the states, and that way they are able to allocate those funds properly. Without the red tape, without the regulations, it's only 25% of the DOE's budget, anyways.
Okay. All right, Ernest.
Why not being able to have both? Why would there not be an opportunity being able to create block grants that would be able to being able to achieve the things that you said, but still allowing there to be regulations? Regulations aren't just necessarily red tape. They allow for certain things to coincide with one another, meaning, i.e., if someone has special education or an IEP, right, an individual educational program, or I know sometimes those acronyms can be different between whatever
Mhm.
state that you're referring to. However, there are certain things that are allocated. There are certain protections for those individuals as well.
Mhm.
Also, additional funding that may either come from the state or from the federal government to being able to help those families along the way. So, getting rid of or decreasing the Department of Education doesn't necessarily achieve what it is that you're stating, nor if
Mhm.
the fact that the Department of Education was gutted without the provisions of those particular block grants set in place prior to those funds then being, redistributed in whichever shape, form, or fashion that they were done. So it was, in my opinion, it was done. It was a knee jerk reaction, right, to some policy that could have been strengthened in other ways. Um,
Mhm.
However, kind of looking at that because you had made mention that you have a child that had special needs. I also have a child that has special needs, so I do see the benefit of having some of those things in there. However, as you look at it within Georgia, with whatever provisions are currently there, are you looking to get rid of, like, what programs are you looking to keep? What programs are you looking to enhance to being able to achieve those goals of education? Like,
Okay,
what's
so first let
working and
me
what's not
address
working? Yeah,
Yeah, first let me
yeah,
address the issue of block grants. So block grants doesn't mean it's free for all, right? Block
correct.
grants usually come with some stipulations. So they would have some stipulations attached to them. But it won't be to the extent as to what we're seeing now. Now, as far as special ed children. Like I told you, my oldest was on the spectrum. I chose
Yeah,
to homeschool him through fifth grade. I
yeah,
found that that was the best avenue for him. My youngest daughter, who we adopted from the foster care system, she came to us with an IEP. We initially had her in the public school system, and it was disaster. I mean, they literally did not teach her. I was appalled as to
right.
what I saw happening. And so we ended up taking her out and putting her in a Montessori school where she flourished. Now, I would like to see in states like Minnesota and South Carolina, they have public Montessoris. I'd like to see something similar to that, where we have options for families that have children. And here's the thing, just because your child's ADHD does not mean that he's incapable or she's incapable of learning. They
Right.
just need a different learning environment.
Yes.
Children are not meant to sit down for 6 hours at a time at a desk, okay? That's a very difficult thing to do for normal children, let alone those with a little bit of issues. So
Mhm.
I like Montessori schools. I don't know if you're familiar. They have so many didactic and manipulatives, and children are allowed to be children and learn in that environment.
So,
Absolutely flourished when she was in a Montessori school environment.
Yes.
so I've seen them up here.
Mhm.
I consider them when my kids were small. All right, but they're a private entity. Are they also?
There's public Montessoris though in Minnesota and even in South Carolina. Why can't we have public Montessoris? We know Montessori works for a lot of kids, and so we should have public Montessori schools.
What I'm concerned about is access. If you look at Montessori, now maybe I'm wrong. I'm not no,
Uh-huh.
SME on education, okay? But if you look at a Montessori school, would that be the equivalent of a charter school if you could get it into Georgia?
It
And
could
and
be,
I
it
worry
could be,
about
or
access. That's what I worry about, access,
what do
equal
you mean? What do
access.
you mean by that, Walt? What do you mean by access?
Meaning, how do you screen? Now, let's say, for example, or hopefully you get it up and running, right? What would be the criteria for a student to get into a Montessori school in Georgia if that should occur?
So
And you seem to be a proponent of that.
I
So,
am. I am. I'm a proponent of charter schools as well. And I'll give you an example. Florida is number one in the nation, and they have true school choice. They have about 796 about charter schools, right? Compared to Georgia's 96.
mm,
And in Florida, families that want to take their children to a different learning environment are eligible for an $8,000 voucher that they can use towards that. In Florida, it's a true school choice state because the funding
mhm.
follows the student. Here in Georgia, the funding follows the institution. So when you have, say, teachers unions or superintendents concerned that if you have children going to a charter school that is taking money out of the school system, it's true. If you don't have a true school choice, right,
Yeah,
state,
yeah.
if the money is following the student, that is not the case. And so in Florida, you have different charter schools or magnet schools or private schools that parents are then able to take their children to. Here's the thing. If you don't give parents choice, if you don't give them options, then they disengage, right? If you give them options, if you give them choice, if you give them the tools, they become engaged. And the number one determinant of a child's success is an engaged parent. Yes, a teacher's great, but you only have a teacher for 1 year. But if you have engaged parents, you will have a successful child. It doesn't matter what learning disabilities that child has. If you have an engaged parent, you will have a successful child. So we need to give parents the options that they need. We need to give them the tools. And those $8,000, it may not cover the entire year, but it gives them a leg up, and it gives them, like I said, the ability to make those decisions for themselves, for their children, because it's the parents, not the school systems, that best know where their child is going to thrive in.
Okay.
Well, I
All
think
right.
that,
That sounds great.
yeah. Well, then that kind of plays into,
Not necessarily good. When I say good, that means that I understand.
yeah.
Go
Hold
ahead,
on.
Ernst.
Yeah, because so I think when Walt had brought up about access, and then you brought up the issue before about how affordable, and the example was college, right? That the Pell Grant used to be able to cover,
Hmm.
you know, majority of your college tuition. And some of these
The Pell
vouchers,
Grant. Mhm.
yeah, the Pell Grant, yes, yes, talking about the Pell Grant, right? But as it relates to this particular voucher that would follow either student and or the institution, whichever way, right? It, to your point, what you just said, it does not cover the cost, or may
Well,
not
in
cover
some
the
instances it does.
in some
Yeah,
instances it
in
does,
some
but
instances it does. Hmm.
but in many it probably does not, right? So then do we how would you create that equity, as far as access to, whether it is a Montessori school, whether it is a charter school, um, or even a private school, because I mean they all fall, it's all still aggregated metrics, within the state of Georgia as it pertains to who's graduating, who's workforce ready, et cetera, et cetera. So regardless, because we still want to make sure that you are approving those private schools that want to start, right? And so how would you ensure that there's equity, especially understanding that I think Georgia has, I don't know, an 80 something percent graduation rate. So, I mean, there are many parents who did not graduate high school, who have children who are now within that K through 12 that may have troubles at home. That means they also may not have the money or resources, whatever have you. How do you ensure equity for their children as well as anyone else's children to being able to have access to the appropriate education that they may need in order for them to be thriving, contributing citizens of Georgia?
Right. So charter schools are public, so they are free to the
Yeah.
parents, right?
Uh-huh.
It's just, it's just a different allocation financially from from your regular public school
Understood. Yeah.
district, if you
But
will.
many are
But
lottery
again, it's
accessed or
if you have a small number of them, they become very difficult to access in that
right.
way.
Right.
But if you have a plethora of them, as in the case of Florida, then you have a lot of options as parents.
Mm.
And again, in the public Montessori schools that I mentioned, Minnesota has so many of them that there's not a lottery system to enter them. And that's the rub, really, Ernest. If we have so little options for our parents that we have to do lottery systems, that is a disgrace. That you have to do a lottery system just to give your child a better chance.
Yeah.
That's a disgrace. We need to give them more plethora of options so that we're not playing Russian roulette with our children's future.
Got it.
Correct. Now, going back to that access, we know that public schools are somewhat disappearing. All right, everything is rolled over to charter. You're getting these $8,000 vouchers. Do this. I have a deep concern. I'm gonna tell you why. There are no role models in our schools for boys. Okay,
Okay. Hmm.
and when I say boys, I mean minority boys.
Got it.
All right, and they're dealing with a teacher that may or may not have dealt with a minority in their entire lives until they came into the school system as a teacher.
Hmm.
That's a big concern of mine. And a lot of these, and well, I think the key thing is and they're mostly female, and they're mostly white. All right. Now I did a couple of shows on the education system here, and what comprises the instructor roles. Okay. They're usually, if and and I have the data for this, I just don't have it in front of me. The majority of your teachers are white women.
Hmm.
Okay. And in a school or neighborhood that is primarily black, how can they relate to a black kid's situation? How can they empathize with somebody they never even dealt with? I think that's a major exposure for Black Americans in education because of the teachers that we have in our schools. Okay, I'm not saying that they should bend over backwards or this and that, but they should take into consideration the with utmost, uh, and I'm gonna use big words for no, I try not to. I got that from grad school. I'm an MBA. Okay, all
Okay.
right, from LIU. All right, and I worked on Wall Street for 35, 40 years. Okay, so I don't use big words for no reason. Stay tuned for part two of our interview with Dr. Nelva Lee. She's a Black Republican, folks. So, we want to have a part two so that we can take a deep dive into her purview of the world and her perspective on the world of politics. You can't escape that, folks. So stay tuned for part two, coming to you shortly. Thank you very much.